Hello. Hello. Can you guys hear me? All right, good. I always have to wonder. So today, I'm going to talk about a 7-step formula to increase fan loyalty. Let me just explain what I've done in order to develop this formula, because it wasn't easy. It wasn't like a formula that I read in a book in order to, oh, we got it working, kind of. It was a formula that was developed by interviewing over 50 teams. So this is from around the world and not just where I'm from. I interviewed over 50 teams in order to develop this formula, and I'll start just by saying 2 teams that I interviewed in particular, the San Diego Chargers on the right, this is American football, and Dallas Cowboys on the left, were born in the same year, 1960. So these are 2 teams that entered the space at the same time, and they have 2 completely different outcomes. So same sport, same field, same, and you'll see in a second, same city size, and 2 completely different outcomes. And if we can get this to work, I'm going to show you why. All right, so one of the teams was #1 in fan engagement. In fact, this team is the most valuable team in the world. It's worth $4.2 billion, $850 million in revenue. #2 in social media following. #1 in road fan engagement. You know what road fan engagement is? That is where one of these teams goes to an opposing player's field and usually gets more fans than the home team. It's remarkable. So one of these teams has done all of this, and the other team is at the complete opposite side of the spectrum. So one is the most valuable team in the world. The other is not the least valuable, because any NFL team is going to be valuable. But they haven't done as good of a job, and they were born at the same time. Now, if you look at where they're at, one's in San Diego, one's in Dallas. San Diego, right here on the beach. It's year-round, beautiful weather. Dallas is in northern Texas, kind of in the heartland of the South. So there's not really any differences there. It's not geographical. If you look at population, San Diego, 3.3 million. Dallas, a little bit less at 2.6. Their GDP, that's how much money they generate with each of these cities, about the same. One is worth $4.2 billion. The other is worth $350 million. Big difference. Again, born at the same time. An initiative came up with both of these cities. The initiative was this: we want you taxpayers to fund a new stadium. One of these cities overwhelmingly approved it, the other did not. Dallas voted yes, San Diego voted no on the stadium. In fact, San Diego left to go to Los Angeles just this year because their fans voted no on a new stadium. And this wasn't a good stadium. If you've ever been to Qualcomm Stadium in San Diego, it's not a very good stadium. So why did Dallas become the most valuable team in the world? Why did their fans vote a multi-billion-dollar stadium for them? And the exact opposite thing happened to the Chargers. Again, in the same league, born at the same time, 1960. Why did one? I will argue, my argument for today is it's because the Dallas Cowboys did an incredible job building a fan community around their team. And that is why they become 100 times more valuable than a team in the same league, because they built a fan community. Now, there's 25 million people in Seoul. There's only 2.6 million people in Dallas. Is there a Seoul team that's worth $4.2 billion? Probably not. Could there be? Absolutely. No question about it. And my argument today is here is how you build that fan community. And I'm going to walk you through the steps because I've interviewed a lot of people. Now, I don't know if you've seen this community. There seems to be a community for everybody. This is called the furry community. All they do is get dressed up in stuffed animal outfits, and they prance around. They attend conventions. They do parades. So there is a community for everything. So I've heard some objections that we can't build a community around our team. That's nonsense. If you could build a community around people dressing up as stuffed animals, you can build a community around a sports team for sure. Communities actually build teams. These communities aren't just connected to the Dallas Cowboys, for example. They're connected to each other, and they're building bonds. And the more bonds that are strengthened and created, the bigger the community becomes, the stronger the community is. Communities, therefore, equal success. You could see that the bigger the community, the more successful the team. So with that kind of story introduction, I want to introduce myself. My name is Mark Fidelman. I am CEO of Fanatics Media. I was a Chargers fan, as you can see here, until they moved to LA. Now I'm kind of boycotting the team, amongst other things. And I am, along with my company, a community builder. So that's my qualification for this presentation. And again, I want to convince you that building a community around your team is the single most valuable thing that you can do. You've got GDP advantage, you've got population advantage, and you've got demographic advantage over the Dallas Cowboys, okay? The most valuable team in the world. All right, so this was not easy, coming up with the 7 loyalty steps. But these are the steps that teams like the Dallas Cowboys and others, it's not just Dallas, have taken in order to become the most valuable team in the world, okay? And I'm not just going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys. I've researched, like I said, over 50 companies, and we're going to talk about a number of things that they're doing individually, because Dallas doesn't do everything right. They just happen to do the whole thing better than anybody else, okay? So let's step through it. So it's important to understand what game we're playing first. I'm not an expert in soul sports, but I am an expert in sports in the United States. And in the United States in 1996, the media owned the relationship with the fans. There were not teams or players connecting directly with their fans unless they met them out in the parking lot of the stadium or they met them out just randomly. That didn't happen in 1996, at least not in the United States. The media owned the relationship with the fans so they could make up stories, they could develop storylines that had their own personal bent to it. They controlled what your fans heard about the team and the players. That was 1996. Now, 2017, you know the game has changed. What's funny is the game's changed, but most teams really aren't taking advantage of this. And I know teams, the sporting community, I know they're on these channels talking to their fans. I see it. I see it here in Korea. I see it in the United States. But my argument is they're not doing it the correct way. They're broadcasting, they're doing one-offs, they're not building a community around their brand, yet they have the tools right in front of them, tools like they've never had before. In 1996, you did not have these tools. Nobody did. But you have them now. You don't need the media. The media, I mean, it's fun to have media coverage, but that's not the focus that you should have if you want to build a community around your brand. So we need to own the fan relationship. If you don't own the fan relationship, and if you don't know that you don't own the fan relationship, you probably don't. But you need to going forward. This is how you build a powerful brand around your team, around your individual. And this goes beyond sports. It doesn't have to be sports. It could be a company that's in the sporting field. It all applies. So this is why, like anything else, this is why building community is difficult. When you have to deal with situations like this. Oh. So you see what's going on here? They're on their phones. There's a game being played, and they're on their phones. Now, I don't think that's any different than here. But this is what teams, this is what the sporting community is competing with. All right, and there is a game playing, but they're all transfixed on their phones. Right? So that's what you're competing with. That's why it's hard to build community, because you're competing with everything else, even in your own home, your own stadium. It's incredibly difficult. So most teams have just either given up, or they feel that social media is the only way to build a relationship with their fans. It's part of the solution, but it's definitely not the whole solution. And I know this, and I mentioned this before, is because I've interviewed all these teams at a deep level. I've written for Forbes, I've written for Entrepreneur Magazine, I continue to do videos and podcasts, and I've talked to all these people. You can go research them yourself and get firsthand knowledge about it. So I know what's going on. And if you look at what's going on with the fans, they tell me that they only have 14% of them have a loyalty to a team, because there is no loyalty program within most of these major league or college sports. They just haven't developed a loyalty program. The ones that have, like the Cowboys, are doing extremely well. So what about Facebook, you might ask? Facebook pages. So Facebook is great. I recommend you use Facebook, but you know Facebook every couple of months changes the algorithm, so you're not able to communicate with all your fans whenever you want. So you can have a massive fan following and not have any ability to reach the majority of them. And in fact, I will argue, and I'll take any bets in here, that within 5 years, you're going to have to pay just to reach any of your fans. So you're back to 1996, right? When the media controlled your fan relationship. You do not want Facebook to own your relationship with your fans. If you're only building fan engagement on Facebook, you're going to be paying for that engagement in the next 5 years. Mark my words. Okay, so how do we do it then? You know, it's great. I brought up all these problems. I talked about Dallas and how they're doing a great job. So how do we do it? Well, I go back to the 7 steps. And these 7 steps, again, took me a year to kind of put together and compile based on my interviews with the teams that are doing it the best. Okay, so let's just dive right in. Identify. Well, how do you build a community if you don't know who your fans are, right? So one example I like to give is the Spurs and how they identify fans on Facebook. Now, the Spurs are part of the Premier League, right? But they target Korean fans on Facebook to get them into their community. So if you're not going to do it here in Korea, I will tell you that people outside of Korea are going to do it to you. So either you guys do it, or someone else is going to do it to you, and I know you don't want that to happen. So how do they do it? On Facebook, if you're not familiar with Facebook, it is incredibly easy to identify your fans. They make it easy. You can go and look at anyone that has ever liked your team or talked about your team, and you can target message them, either within Facebook Messenger. I know I'm getting tactical here. Facebook Messenger, or just a simple ad. And because you're the team that you're targeting your fans, it's very, very inexpensive to target them and bring them into a community, either on Facebook or outside of Facebook. Even better, you can do what's called lookalike fans. So these are fans that look exactly like the fans that like you. So you can bring in new fans that are people that are like the people that already like you. Hopefully that's not too confusing, but Facebook makes this very easy, and that's what the Spurs are doing here in Korea already. Okay, so the results. I always like to talk about results. So what did it do for the Spurs? Well, their own page got 112% uplift, right? And they got 3,500% more people talking about them only because they were able to identify who those fans were. And a 215% reach increase during a campaign they ran in order to bring more fans into their community. This is all done on Facebook. Facebook makes it so easy. If you're willing to spend money on Facebook, they'll bring out the red carpet for you. But that's the trend. They're going to make you pay for it in the future. So yes, build your Facebook fan page, but make sure you take them outside of Facebook as well, or you're going to be paying for that access again. 1996 all over again. So the second step in the teams that do this the best, the companies that do this the best. I say teams, I mean companies, and I mean individuals. It could be individual sporting stars that are building their own communities. Is they create a unique culture that the community can claim as their own. A great example of this is the LPGA. The LPGA has a sign when you first walk into their establishment. It says, "Act like a founder." What do they mean by that? Well, they want all their employees and their golfers to act as if they own the LPGA, like it's a startup. And a prime example of this is Michelle Wie, who builds culture, who builds this relationship with her fans because she's sharing her life moments. Not necessarily her golfing moments, her life moments. She's acting like a founder by sharing her own life to bring more people, more fans into the LPGA. She's creating that culture that people want to be a part of. She's approachable, she's reachable, she's likable. She's creating a culture around that brand. And the best companies, or the best teams, are doing exactly the same thing. Be more approachable by doing updates like that. And there's some other ones here. It's not just Michelle Wie. Again, they're telling everybody, act like a founder and reach out to fans on a regular basis, reach out to sponsors. It's not just about fans. Okay, number 3, you've got to give your team a voice. And this is a little bit harder than it sounds. When I say voice, I mean like personality. Who represents, what caricature does your team or your brand represent? And one of the better ones I like to talk about, because it's in the middle of the US, and nobody ever talks about teams in the middle of the United States, unfortunately, is the Minnesota Twins. Now, disclosure, I grew up in Minnesota. Probably the nicest people in the United States. So their community, the Twins, Minnesota Twins baseball community, reflects their fans. Very friendly tones, very nice, very humble, always giving back, not braggadocious. You know, a New York Yankees community, if you know the New York Yankees, mean, tough, gritty, would not fit in Minnesota. So when we talk about voice of your team or your organization, I'm talking about creating a voice and a personality that reflects your fan base, right? You've already identified your fan base in step 1. Now you've got to give them a voice, give them a personality. And the way I do it, and the way I've seen the best teams do it, is they simplify this. They basically say, choose 3 words that best represent your voice or your personality. And I've got some examples here. Bold, sassy, loud. So this would be a New York team, probably. But you want to put a disclaimer around it, because you want people to understand really what this means. Bold, but not arrogant, for example. Sassy, but not offensive. Loud, but not obnoxious. You're really shaping the voice and the personality of the brand. And I always like to give examples. So I don't know how many of you have heard the Harlem Globetrotters in the United States, but they're not an NBA level team, but they're like, if Cirque du Soleil met an NBA team, that would be the Harlem Globetrotters. It's all about entertainment. It's fun, it's funny, and entertaining are kind of their 3 key words that describe their voice and their personality. Conor McGregor, UFC. I don't know if you follow UFC over here. Very cocky, loud, braggadocious. That is his personality. That is what people expect. That's his voice. And if you look at Floyd Mayweather, very quiet. He's an adventurer. He likes to travel, and he's got a lot of focus, right? 3 very successful voices and personalities here, and but they're all different. And here's the thing. You can have a voice. It can evolve over time. Just because you start with a certain voice or a certain personality does not mean it can't evolve over time. But you don't want to be schizophrenic either. You don't want to change your personality from day to day. Can you imagine if you're in a relationship with somebody and they have a different personality from day to day to day? That's not going to work. It's not effective. And the highest performing teams that have communities around their brand, and remember, the bigger the community, the more the engagement, the more valuable, the more revenue that team has, they have a very consistent voice. You know it. It's like an identifier. If you hear it, you know, hey, that's New York Yankees, that's Minnesota Twins. I belong to that community because I recognize that voice. So I could spend all day on number 4. Number 4 is about data. You heard a lot of it from the previous presentation from Mr. Song. I was happy that I'm following that because data to me is absolutely key. And the best companies that do data correctly are the most successful. Even take out community. Take out community. If you just want to focus on one of these steps, this should be the step right here, data. So NASCAR does it best. NASCAR, if you don't know, is a big racing organization. They manage all the races for the NASCAR circuit. They look at 14,000 conversations per minute. That's how much data they're analyzing every single minute. So you can imagine kind of the insights that they're coming up with. 45 million NASCAR mentions a month. 45 million a month. That's what they're analyzing. They're doing so much analysis, they're segmenting, they're looking at the data, and they're categorizing that data. So anything they put out into that community, those fans, they get instant feedback on. They know whether they're doing something right, whether they're doing something wrong, whether a sponsor is successful or not. They go a step further. They take all this data. Imagine if you did this with the teams that you work with or the brands you work with. They take all this data and they go to a sponsor and they say, 1 million of our fans are talking about your brand. 1 million. NASCAR fans are talking about your brand. Why aren't you sponsoring one of our drivers? Or why aren't you sponsoring one of our events? 1 million people are already talking about you. Imagine if you were sponsoring one of the drivers or one of the events, how much more activity you get. They're incredibly smart about the data. So the decisions are easy. If you don't know what to do with your sport team, your brand, your individual that you're managing, whatever, if you have the data, the decisions are easy, and it's easy to defend when you're making those decisions. Okay, so NASCAR, I like to joke, knows their fans better than their own families because they watch, they learn, they see what they click on, and all this is trackable, as you well know. So they know their fans extremely well, and they store them in CRM systems. If you don't know what a CRM system is, it's basically a database for fans or customers. And knowing your fans, most importantly to me, pays. So because they have the data, because they know what to put out in social media, their mentions went up 55%. And that's a big number when you're talking millions already. Social volume up 66% just because they know the right content to put out on social media to increase it. They're just doubling up because they test data, they test content, they look at the data, they do more of what works, they do less of what doesn't work. So they're able to increase this. And 22% revenue lift because they know their clients so well. They know their fans so well, they know what they're going to buy or what they're not going to buy. Increases revenue. Number 5, out of 7, empowering. And this is where most, I think, sports teams fall down, including some of the top performers, because it's not easy. This is not an easy step. So we talked about this before. You remember the girls, they're on their phones. They have short attention spans. It's a generational thing. I think I'm right at the cusp. I have a problem with my phone and what I'm using it for, but it's even worse with the younger generations. So in this example, he's looking at a phone. This would never have happened when I was a kid. We didn't have phones, number 1. And number 2, it just wasn't a cool thing to not be paying attention to the game. But these kids have short attention spans. Adults like me have short attention spans. I'm just as guilty. So what are you going to do to empower your fans in order to engage with you? Well, this is what the Seattle Sounders do to promote their fans. I think this is very clever and pretty easy to do. So they look at who's Instagramming their team or talking about their team, what have you, and then they put them up on the big screen and they say, follow this individual. And they get thousands of people following them because they're up on a big screen, because they're Instagramming the team. So they're encouraging, and I think Mr. Song talked about this, and Alex to some extent, they're encouraging this kind of behavior of creating content for their team for free. And I don't think it's random. I think they're choosing people to put up on the big screen to reward them and to say, hey, follow this guy because he's an excellent advocate, excellent community member, excellent fan. That's some really cool stuff that's so inexpensive to do. It is not expensive to honor a fan every once in a while, especially at a game, and they love it. They'll never forget this. Okay, another thing, since my argument, millennials, people like me, are on social media all the time, this is what Under Armour, a sponsor, did with Cam Newton, who plays in the NFL as well. This is on Snapchat. They created a game on Snapchat. This is a Snapchat game. Okay, very quick game on Snapchat. A lot of people engaged with this Snapchat game. Snapchat, in the US anyway, is going down in relevance. Instagram is going way up, so something to pay attention to. But there's no reason why you can't do something like that on Instagram as well. I think Alex showed some examples earlier. So engaging your fans where your fans are, which is social media, no question, in order to keep them in the community, engaged as a community member. And so fans that interact with you equal higher engagement. The more fan interaction that you have by engaging them on social media, but engagement to me is a two-way street. It's not you just talking to them, it's getting them to talk back to you. It's getting them to do things for you. It's getting them to interact with your brand and creating content as well. That's a 72% lift in engagement just by following that step. And my punchline, which I'm going to give you earlier, is engagement equals profits. Okay? And I'll show you why. So number 6, the 6th step, informed. Keeping the community informed of your progress. It's one thing to identify your fans. It's one thing to engage them. It's one thing to start a relationship with them. It's another to keep a relationship. Some of you might be in a relationship, some of you might be married. You know what I'm getting at here. You can't just have a one-night stand with these fans. You've got to keep them entertained, just like anybody else that you're in a relationship with. You can't just sit on the couch all day. There's got to be other things that you do with these fans. And the Denver Broncos, I feel, are one of the best at doing this. Again, another NFL football team. Okay? The Denver Broncos send email out, newsletters out, but the most innovative thing I think I've seen them do is on mobile. So they have a mobile app, a Denver Broncos mobile app, and they use that app to send notifications. You know those blue notifications and the notifications that appear on your screen. And these notifications just don't lead to a team news update. They lead to very interactive content like live streaming. Hey, we're having a live streaming. Come listen to what your favorite player is saying. And live streaming, it's a two-way conversation, right? It's not just one way. It's a two-way conversation. They also do a lot of virtual reality stuff and a lot of augmented reality stuff. If you're at the game and you hold your phone up, you get all sorts of content, all sorts of information that's appearing on that screen at the same time. You want to know if there's a line for the bathroom. You want to know if there's a line for refreshments. Their app will tell you all that. They're using the app to engage their fans because they know their fans' heads are buried in their phones anyway. Very innovative. And then when they're not playing, they're still pinging their fans to show them game highlights in case they missed it, or game interviews or post-game interviews. They're constantly engaging their fans on their mobile device where their fans are 70% of the time. Okay, another team, this is an NBA team this time, the Golden Warriors, champions. This is what they do if you've missed a game. This is their way of keeping their fan base informed. They create their own virtual highlight reel. Now you know, the media, like I said, the media used to do this on behalf of the brand. Now it's so inexpensive, so easy to do it themselves. So this is what they send out, and they do a ton of these after every game. So they'll create their own highlight reels. This is on Instagram, 16 seconds. I'm looping it. But this could be put on Facebook. It could be put on YouTube, their own highlight reel. They're doing this so they keep their fan base informed because they know their fans can't watch every single game. So they create their own highlight reel. They slow it down. They make it cool. I saw Alex give a scorpion example. I love that. But they're constantly nurturing their fans by doing this. That keeps them informed of what's going on. That's the sixth step, a very important step. You built a relationship. You're going to maintain it. You've got to be creative. You can't just go take somebody out to the same restaurant every single time. You've got to do a lot of creative things and keep them informed. I'm a business traveler. I love it when my family takes pictures of what they did that day or a video of some exciting adventure they went on, and they send it to me while I'm over in Korea. I love that. And that's what teams need to be doing. Keep their fans informed. Don't give up on them, even if it's the off season. Okay, my favorite part of this whole formula, whole engagement, I'm unabashedly a capitalist, is monetization. If you do 1 through 6 right, and I know some of this is challenging. If you do 1 through 6 right, 7 comes extremely easy. 7 is not a problem. 7, monetization, will happen without you having to do anything. Because you've identified your fans, you've nurtured your fans, you know through data what they like and what they don't like. Anything that you produce, products, tickets, environments, I like Mr. Song in creating these environments. He knows his audience. Creating these environments where people can come, what looks like a rave to me, but maybe that's what passes for entertainment at sporting events. That's fine, whatever it is. But you already know that. So monetization, you will know what to sell your fans, and your fans will buy it because you've done step 1 through 6. The Dallas Cowboys are the only NFL team in the United States that sell their own merchandise. Why is that? The other teams find it too difficult. They don't spend the time to engage their fans, learn about their fans, and do the hard work of manufacturing their merchandise for their fans. The Dallas Cowboys know their fans so well, they've taken that step from other third parties. They're their own manufacturer of products. And they kill it because they know what their fans will buy. They're not relying on the NFL or a third party to figure that out for them. They already know. They're not giving that up. That's part of the reason why they're the most valuable team in the world. Okay, another team that does this very well is the 49ers. Not as good as the Cowboys, but very good at understanding. They're in Silicon Valley. They're not really in San Francisco anymore. They're in Silicon Valley. So they're using a lot of that technology that we talked about, especially on the data side, to understand what their fans want, and they give it to them. Very good at monetization. Another good team in the NBA is the Nets. They've got a revenue per fan of $17, which is okay. It's not great. But the Memphis Grizzlies, in the middle of the country, smaller fan base, has $52 per fan. Why? Because they have not mastered, but they have gone through these 7 loyalty steps, figured out what their fans want, figured out what to sell them, and they're doing it on a regular and consistent basis. That's $17 versus $52 in the same league. And I'll go back to the Chargers, Cowboys, born on the same date, 1960. One's worth $4.2 billion, the other's worth $350 million. Oh my God, that's a huge difference. If it's 1960 today, let's say it's 2017, and you got two sports teams starting at the same time, wouldn't you want the path that leads to $4.2 billion? I know I would. So in sum, let me talk about how I think this applies to the Korean sports community. I don't see any reason not to follow the same formula. You've got more people in this city by far than Dallas, New York, Los Angeles, San Diego combined. More people. Now I realize you have to bring more fans into sports, and I realize how difficult that is. But I know it can be done. I mean, I've heard some great ideas already. You still need to follow that 7-step process, and fans want your attention. You've got to give it to them. And I think I've covered the benefits 100 times, but the benefits will be more monetization and more value. The team will be worth a lot more money, or your organization will be worth a lot more money, or an individual that you represent will be worth a lot more money. So when we put it all together, this is kind of a funny thing, but this is kind of how I think about it. The point here is, there's going to be fair weather fans, but there's going to be fans that stick it out with you, and that's kind of a joke, but you want to turn these fans into super fans, or they're going to flip to another team. And that's the primary reason why, especially with competition overseas, you're going to want to turn your fans into super fans, and it equals super profits in my world. Okay, so wrapping it up here. Here are the two excuses I hear all the time. I'm kind of done hearing about these excuses, but the first one is our budget can't support this. We don't know if it'll produce results. I don't know if you've heard that one. I've heard it way too many times. The reality is, of the teams, individuals, companies that are worth the most, making the most, fan engagement, building a fan community is the #1 reason why they're ahead of everybody else. So if you know that to be true, and I talked to 50 teams, you can go talk to as many as you like. If you talk to this many teams, and that's what they're telling you, and I mean, there might have been 1 or 2 that didn't mention community, but most of them did. If that's the #1 reason, why would you do anything else? That's the first thing I would focus on. The other objection I get is, we don't know how to build a community around our sports team. Well, that's fair. You know, maybe you haven't seen this presentation. I mean, this presentation is just the start. It's the starting line. There's a lot of work that goes into building a community like the Dallas Cowboys did. It's a lot of work, I admit it. But there are people, there are experts, and I bet you there's some here in Korea that can help you do it. All right, so that's it. I want to challenge you guys to do at least one of these steps in the next couple of weeks. Even if it's just identifying your fans. It is so easy to identify your fans on Facebook, for example. But I challenge you to do one of these steps. The other challenge I have for you is, if you have a challenge to me about anything that you saw here, to raise your hand and to ask if there's, if you have some objection to what I just shared. If you think I'm wrong, if you see it a different way, I'd love to hear your objection. So thanks again. I'm Mark Fidelman. Pleasure to be here.